The United Nations has praised Vietnam's efforts in containing COVID-19. The UN has shared Vietnam's successful experience in the first phase of the pandemic control with other countries. These remarks were made by UN Resident Coordinator in Vietnam, Kamal Malhotra, at a meeting with Prime Minister Nguyễn Xuân Phúc on March the 10th to better understand how the international community has assessed Vietnam's efforts, as well as the UN's support methods for Vietnam in the second phase of the anti-epidemic process. I talked to UN Resident Coordinator in Vietnam, Kamal Malhotra, in his office in Hanoi. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Kamal Malhotra, for joining our interview today. As the UN Resident Coordinator in Vietnam, what's your assessment of Vietnam's fighting against COVID-19 in its first phase?
We believe that Vietnam overall is doing an extremely good job. It was able to bring, in the first wave, the number of cases down from 16 to 0.
So with a positive assessment of Vietnam's efforts in fighting against COVID-19, as you just mentioned, the UN has shared the experience of the country in dealing with COVID-19 to other countries in the world. So what's your comment on this?
We've used Vietnam as an example for phase 1. There are no other countries, to the best of my knowledge, that reduced the numbers from whatever they were to 0. Vietnam has shortened the time dramatically in terms of the test kit. I mean, it really relates to, I think, having quite an effective public health system on the one hand, and on the other hand, having an overall policy that people in this situation should be treated well in terms of food. So even the quarantined streets and communes, I believe food was being sent in, and people, all their basic necessities were being taken care of. I can't comment on other countries. I would imagine it might be true in some, but not in all. But I think it would be consistent with the socialist orientation of Vietnam. So I think if you take all of these into account, Vietnam is doing an extremely good job, not just of the technical and the medical side, but also of taking care of people who've been mandatorily quarantined.
So regarding the new cases of COVID-19 infections in the past few days, how does the UN assess the measures and efforts of Vietnam in controlling and preventing the disease from spreading in the community?
Now, of course, we are in a more complex second phase. But even in the second phase, so far, it's still early days, but Vietnam seems to be doing a good job of being able to track down people who were in that unfortunate aeroplane. The UN has already been providing support to the government of Vietnam, of course led by the WHO. I've asked the WHO to continue to lead our technical work, but there are many other agencies of the UN that can provide their support. We are also now looking beyond just the public health and medical areas to looking at the assessment of the economic impact of this crisis. Obviously, the economic impact is going to be significant for all countries. The UN released its preliminary report on that globally 2 days ago. I gave a copy of it to the Prime Minister yesterday as one of the first people to receive it. But that was global. We are now looking at Vietnam-specific impact that is going to be significant.
Well, once again, thank you so much for joining our program.